And so this is me. And this is a drawing I did recently. It's the first time I did like a self-portrait and when I had my hair short. And so I thought it was cool to kind of do like the two pictures. And then anyway, I am a Northern Ontario contemporary artist. I am currently going for my BFA at Nipissing University. I just finished my first year. I have a very fluid and geometric style, as you'll see in some of my paintings, and I'm an atypical artist, so I'm neurodiverse because of my autism spectrum disorder, and I'm inspired by sexuality, politics, nature, and connection. Politics, I like doing stuff regarding like my disability, and I did one on a nursing home, and I'm starting to get into political art, so it's really fun. And I'm also a multi-medium artist, so I use different kinds of stuff. And then these are the murals I've done. This is one of them I did in my last year of high school at Sudbury Secondary, which is kind of like one of my geometric style. Well, when I first started it, actually. And then this is the box I did for up here. And then I did this at Llewellyn Park Secondary School. And this was my first mural, which I did in grade 10. So this is kind of like my style of painting. I have a very fluid style and a geometric style. And it kind of like, I flip-flop between the two depending on how I'm feeling or what I'm drawing. Linda actually has the plant one.
Yeah, I was going to say, I see mine.
Yeah, Linda has the plant one. She bought that during one of the art crawls. And then one of the one on the left here at the top is my oil painting that I did. The rest are all acrylic.
So if you're not speaking, you need to mute because we can hear background noise.
I don't know who that. It's okay. If everyone can hear me fine, that's okay. Anyway, these are some, like, I don't just do like my own style. I do I have kind of I've been trying to develop a realistic style. So the one on the left is a painting I did for my partner's parents, my boyfriend's parents. Well, they're his grandparents actually, and I thought that they were really cute in the photo they gave me. And then the one in the middle is just a commission I've done, and then the one on the right is a painting I've done of my two dogs after the dog on the right, Ranger, passed away. And then
wow, she's a good painter.
Thanks. And then I also do other mediums. I sell prints currently of the one in the middle. It's really big.
It was bigger last year.
Yeah, and then
it's so good.
I also do pointillism as that's in the right. And then I also like to work with like I like to use cotton balls because I really like clouds. So this was actually one of my first projects I did this semester, is the lady in the cotton balls. And then I've been starting to do life drawing, so I included a picture of my foot there that I was practicing in class. And then I also do I like to do ceramics, although I'm not skilled in it, but I got to practice it this year, and I made a cute little root lady for class as well. And then this is something I'm currently working on. So it's really, really big. I think it's 40 times 36 inches, I think. And I'm doing it all in pointillism. I currently only have 22 by 8.5 inches left, like done. So it's not very much done yet, but it's gonna be super cool when it's done. It's gonna be super cool. And then my career's developed, like it kind of grew in the past few years. So like how I started was Art Battle, which is the picture in the middle, and that was awesome. I had a lot of fun there. That's where if Evelyn's here, she could see Drew in the background. There's our man. I miss working with the artists in Sudbury. Art Battle was like where everything began for me. And like Monique took me under her wing for a bit. So I talked to Smeet still, and Linda was there, and she bought one of my paintings, I think, before too. And it was great. It was a great start. And then I also like to use Photoshop. So I included a flyer I did for one of my virtual paint nights. And I photoshopped myself on Bob Ross because why not? And I did it for a club at my school. And then the picture on the bottom right is I haven't just done those 3 murals. I've done a couple at the Northgate Mall, but no one can see them because the store's closed. And that's me painting one of them. And then I sell my prints on the bottom right. I also sell prints through Brian Norrie in the Norrie Gallery, but I like to just sell my own sometimes too, so I know the quality of what people are getting. And then I also do album art. So I like to do hand painted album arts for my friends in class. And or not my friends in class, sorry, he was in my class at some point. I went to college with him, and he makes surf rock, and he gives me a prompt and then I do that for him. And then yeah, that's it. Thank you. So if you scan the QR code, it goes to my my link tree, and there's kind of like my website,
Huh?
my Instagram,
Right
and I think that's it. I'm not sure. There might be something else there. And then I designed my own logo. I had a hard time in Photoshop, but I did it and it looks cool. So
Yeah, it
yeah.
looks very cool. Great job.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Perfect. So I'm just checking to see. Okay. There we go. I think that's where the noise is coming from. Okay, so Amanda or Mo, do you want to present next?
Sure, I can go. Linda, are you all right to present the slides for me?
Yeah, just a sec.
Awesome. Thank you.
I just have to bring it up. Okay, just a minute. I'll try to get it so it's all good to go, and then we'll let you chat and tell everybody. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay. Oh, whoops. I probably should have done my sharing first. Okay. Can people see Amanda? Okay. So take it away, Amanda.
All right, this will be short and sweet. But yeah, so that is me. I'm a dance instructor and a choreographer, and I'm currently building a business plan to start my own dance studio. And here's just a little photo of me teaching some little babies how to dance. Yeah, so you can do next slide. So I started as a choreographer, and I worked actually 6 months ago. I moved to Sudbury from Toronto. So I've worked the last 10 years as a choreographer for theater companies in Toronto and in the East Coast, and as well as in Winnipeg. So kind of all over, but mostly in the Toronto and Greater Toronto area. And from there, this is a photo of one of my first shows I did, Rocky Horror Picture Show, which was super fun. Yeah. Next slide. Some more images of shows that I choreographed. We have Heather's on the left. I don't know if anyone's seen the movie. It's a throwback. And then on the right top, Jesus Christ Superstar, and the bottom right there is Carrie the musical, which is not a great musical, but it was fun to work on. Yes, next slide. And some other projects that I worked on the left there was a site-specific production. So we went around Barrie and used the city to do the Music Man. So they were in the library here, and everybody other than the actors that you see in front are just like at the library, and we showed up and did some scenes and singing and then carried on with the audience. It was a very challenging project, but really cool experience to learn from. We also worked with actually some community youth, and they were our ensemble. So that was kind of one of my first experiences working with younger artists, and started my teaching kind of experience there. And then we have some more images of just some other shows that I did. And we can go next slide. So basically teaching, I've been teaching on and off for about, I guess 15 years. And whenever I wasn't doing a theater contract, I was teaching to pay the bills. And then it kind of transitioned into something that I was more passionate about in the last couple of years. Particularly, I had my own kids in the last couple of years, and I started to really enjoy more and more like what I got to see in these little kids and watch them grow and keep dancing, and it was really rewarding. So the last few years I've started focusing more on teaching and getting more teacher certification courses and that sort of thing done, to hopefully start my own business. And you can go next slide. And these are my kids. On the left, Summer, she's 3 weeks old, and then on the right is Rory. Yeah, I hope to make a studio that is really family focused. So classes that involve guardians and their kids, and doing classes for babies and guardians, and postpartum classes for moms, and having events that, you know, the family can come in, and just using dance and music as kind of a tool to like help families connect with one another and have a good time. And that's kind of the driving force behind what I want to do and what I want to do differently. I grew up in a competitive dance environment, which was great, and but I want to do something that is more family focused and more younger years focused, as far as classes for little dancers. So yeah, that's everything. This concludes my presentation.
Oh, very cool. Thank you. I think it's a very interesting concept in that as well, right?
I really, really like your idea. I think it'll really work out. Like,
Thank you.
I like how passionate you are too about, like, it seems like you really want to do this, and I can see your drive for it. And so I think it's gonna be really good. And honestly, with my generation's having kids right now, and they're starting to. And so in kind of like a time where a lot of people are very like disconnected and isolated, it'll be a good place for like parents to meet other parents and stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you. That's totally my experience too. I'm like new mom and just like looking for things that are in places to meet new moms and parents as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I guess, Mo, it's up to you now.
Okay, I'm on share screen.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. First of all, I would like to congratulate Ivy and Amanda. I thought your presentations were excellent, and I really like what you're doing, and it's really classy. Good for you. Myself, I'm a little older than you guys, and I guess I'm sort of on my bucket list right now. There's one thing I always wanted to do, and that's to make a movie. So here I am. Now, I've got some shades on tonight. It's because I broke my glasses, and these are prescription. So I'm not trying to look like a Hollywood star. I'm
Well,
just trying to be
I
able,
thought it was special for your presentation, Mo.
I'm just trying to be able to see correctly. That's all. So here we go. Thank you, Linda. So the name of the project is called Star Wounds, and it's a film or a television production. Okay, and it involves actually 3 projects. It's a giant research project with 3 options. If we're looking at making a 2-hour movie, then it's going to be option A, which I've described in my business plan and Linda's received. And if we're looking at doing some Netflix episodes or television episodes, then we're looking at option B or C. And so we're looking at doing Star Wounds, a film or TV production, and it's based on a live theater concert production. Okay, so here we go. So what I need to do is to be able to make a case for a film producer to come into Sudbury and show them that we have the talent here in Sudbury in order to do it. So this is the theme. This is the synopsis, really shortened up. It's a group within the city of Greater Sudbury has entered a Hollywood filmmaking contest. A grand prize of $100 million will be awarded against the making, marketing, and distribution of a Hollywood film to showcase the winning entry. The contest has one question: what is it about your region that makes it great and sets it apart from other communities on a global scale? So the Sudbury group will be in competition with Quebec City, Montreal, Hollywood, Nashville, San Francisco, Mexico, Iceland, Norway, France, Shanghai, Japan, and others. And in the end, Greater Sudbury is gonna win. Why? Because we're making the movie. And so our picture is about the making of a theatrical concert production created and produced in Sudbury. Now, when we're talking about $100 million, that sounds like a lot of money, that's for sure. But in the United States, that's an average cost for a regular movie. An average movie will cost about 65 million plus marketing and distribution of about 35 million, which makes it a grand total of about 100 million. So that's not like an over exaggeration. Then you have movies that are 200 million, 300 million, and so on. In Canada, an average movie is about $5 million and below. I am told that Telefilm has a budget right across all the productions in Canada of about $100 million, which is the same amount as one Hollywood film. Anyways, let's put that aside. Now, so looking in Sudbury here, I've sort of looked at what Sudbury Theatre Center has done. And in 1972-73, that's when he started. They did 7 productions. Following year, 7, 7, 7. 1975, it starts going up. And then I just sort of shortened up things because it's almost 50 years down the line, and they've done approximately 500 productions. That's amazing. Now, if we look at Yes Theatre, I went on their website and I've listed the productions they've done. And they started, I believe, in 2010, and they did Bed and Breakfast, Mary Poppins, James the Giant, Mamma Mia, The Sound of Music, and the list goes on. Okay, hang on a second. I'm just going to check out my notes. Okay, yeah. So anyways, our production that I'm looking at doing in terms of a live theater concert production is has original stories. It has an original theater script. It has original music, and it has a original live production. And it's going to be staged by the greater arts and culture community, who will be called upon to come together and bring the stage production together. Now, who is our arts and culture community? Well, of course, there's Theatre Cambrian, there's Yes Theatre, there's Sudbury Theatre Center, there's a Sudbury Symphony, there's a TNO, there's La Place des Arts, there's all kinds of different community of artists that can come together. But from across town, we've also been involved with a bunch of productions with Les Productions Café Musique. Café Musique has been around for about 50 years now. About 30 years, 35 years as a school production and then as a community production. And last decade, we've been working with Caneta 1534. And here's the finale of one of our productions. And do you notice the girl in the blue jeans there in the middle? You know, does anybody recognize her? That's Rachel Desaulniers. She's in our class here tonight.
Oh, I can't believe you did that.
I
I'm
had
kidding.
to. Doesn't she
kidding.
look great? She just looks like a little young girl there. Cool. So here we go. That's Caneta 1534. And we performed at Collège Boréal, Chalford Arena, Whitewater Park, Zilda Arena, Grace Hartman Amphitheater, and Science North. And our story was about Louis Riel. In 1885, Louis is condemned for having committed crimes of high treason against the federal government, and he was executed by hanging on November 16th, 1885. And from his prison cell, Louis reflects upon how it all began. And the story begins with Jacques Cartier at Fontainebleau in France. If you know your history, Jacques Cartier sailed into the St. Lawrence Seaway in 1534, and he met with the Grand Chief Donnacona at Stadacone. And in 1608, Champlain came back and he founded Quebec City. You can see some shots. We did that production in the, I think this one is the Chalford Arena. And over here, we have Hélène de Champlain, who sings French-Canadian songs to First Nations. Hélène de Champlain, she was Samuel de Champlain's wife, and she was very active working with First Nations and with the children of the residents. And over here, you've probably heard of the Radisson Chain Hotel, I'm sure. Well, here's the real Radisson, and he's a little older, and he's one of our great explorers. He expanded the fur trades beyond Lake Superior into the west. And over here, he's a little older, but he's trying to impress the kids there, letting them know how brave of a soul that he was. And in this scene, we have Le Gouverneur d'Arcanson and Radisson. For those of you who know Eric Lepalme, that's him on the left. He's performed in some productions with Yes, I believe, and with Theatre Cambrian. And in the 1660s, the Richemont Carignan-Salière came to Canada. In 1661, King Louis, King of France, declared war on the Iroquois and the French allies with the Hurons, Montagnais, and Algonquins. And here's a nice shot. Vive la Nouvelle-France. And in 1680, French population reaches 10,000 residents. And the reason is for the King of France who sent les filles du roi over here to marry the men and to make children and to make kids. And these girls, they would come in. There's a story that they would come in at Quebec City, and Quebec would choose the prettiest one, and the ugliest one would be sent to Montreal. Now that's a joke, okay? So don't get mad at me. Anyways, they were trained by the Grey Nuns, and the ratio for men was about 35 men to 1 girl back then. And because of them, the French population started to develop. And in this scene over here, we have the Treaty of Paris in 1763, when we had the regime change from French to the British. And over here, we have First Nations, French, Métis, British, Scottish, Irish, united in the War of 1812 against the USA. And then we have the show finale with a song that we called O Canada. And on the left, she's our theater director. Her name was Hélène Dallaire. She's with the TNO in Sudbury. And myself, I'm the producer. My name, Maurice Beaubertillon. And across the years, we've been involved with production, all original productions. The first one in the 80s was Rock in the Land of the Kings. The Enchanted Forest was performed at the Sudbury Theatre Center in Athlone in Montreal. Then we had Myths of King Neptune that was done at the Grand Theatre in the Sudbury Arena. Jean de Celeste Grand Theatre, Dr. Grand Theatre, Legends of the Vikings, Canata 1534, Canata Champlain, Ariel, Canata 150. And the newest production that I'm working on right now is Star Wound. Back to Star Wound. In Greater Sudbury, we have a story of global proportions. It begins with a lonely meteoroid.
You're
in
only going to have
search of-
about 2 minutes, Mo.
Yeah, in search of its destiny, traveling at 25 kilometers per second. The impact, 1 billion times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. The Sudbury Basin, second largest crater on Earth. We have a huge global story. It's a live theater concert production. It's a film or TV production. And do we dare imagine Greater Sudbury without our meteor? We would have this scenery. Thank you for being so patient.
Great job. Great job. Thank you. So we'll just ask you to stop your screen sharing, and then I will introduce you to our speaker, and I'll make sure that that Anne also becomes co-host.
How's that?
That's great. Thank you so much. That was really interesting.
Cool.
Okay, so we're lucky to have Anne Cooper, who runs Learning Initiatives. And she's going to talk to you about all of the legal and the HR and the contracts. So take it away, Anne.
Thanks very much, Linda. Nice to be here tonight and to see you. And I really enjoyed watching some of those presentations. Would have loved to have seen all of your presentations, and they certainly get me inspired with the arts. A lot more than my presentation is going to do you, because we're talking about such opposite kinds of things like legalities and business law and those kinds of things, but certainly important information that you do need to know going forward as a self-employed artist or in an arts related business. So I am just going to share my screen and I'll pull up my presentation. There we go. So this is our focus tonight, is to really look at the legal side of doing a business. And part of that is going to be also talking about some HR considerations. These are the topics that I'm hoping to cover, and I would like to give you an opportunity, if you have some questions as we go along, to ask them as we go, because we will be going from topic to topic and getting into some different topics. And so I'd rather get a question sort of at the end of each topic, and I'll open that out to you and ask if anyone has a question. I don't know what you've been doing in your seminars so far, but I don't know if you just raise those. Like I know in the Zoom, there's a little blue hand you can click up to show that you have a question. I don't know if you've been doing that kind of thing, but I suppose you could also use the chat, although it's a little hard for me to see the chat while I'm doing this, but maybe Linda, you can also keep an eye on that for me.
Yeah, I'll watch the chat or any hands. I'll try to keep on top of it.
Thanks. And the hands, it's nice because it'll show me on my screen if someone's put their hand up, it flags me that, so that's easy for me to see too. Thanks. So we will talk about self-employment, business structures, a bit about business law, hiring, being hired, contracts, and a little bit on negotiation. So that's where we're headed tonight. A question that I get asked a lot is about what really is self-employment income, and what does it mean to be self-employed? And essentially, you might be earning money in any number of ways, but basically, if you're not an employee of somebody else, if they are not putting you on payroll and taking deductions and giving you a T4 slip at the end of the year, if none of that's happening, then it's pretty safe to say that you are self-employed, and whatever you're earning is through self-employment income. But kind of going along with this, I mean, because that could be anything. That could be just a freelancer. That could be someone going from gig to gig. That could be somebody who's actually creating, like Amanda, you were talking about a studio, a sort of a bricks and mortar place. So it can be any version of those things. And you can even be doing multiple different kinds of things as a self-employed person. But as I said, if you're not on someone's payroll, then you're earning money, then you are self-employed. But a second question that I often get from clients and people I meet in my workshops, they want to know how they can become a legitimate business, because often people are doing a little bit of something, creating things and selling them before they even think of it necessarily becoming a business. But then you get to a certain place and you say, hey, this hobby, and I'm making money at it, and I have a sense that really I should be a legitimate business. So what do I need to do? And really what that all is going to come down to is being compliant with the laws that relate to your business, and essentially filing as a self-employed person with CRA. So it really kind of comes just down to those things. And the laws in Canada, we have 3 different levels that we have to consider. So there's the federal laws that relate to businesses, there's the provincial laws, and then there's municipal legal considerations. So we want to look at it at all those 3 levels. So one of the first things that people usually do once they start to look at these legalities is say, well, I need to have a formal business structure. Now, you do and you don't. I'll just sort of say that, because you do inevitably have a formal business structure. And if you're looking in the for-profit model, you are looking at a sole proprietorship, a partnership, or a corporation. But even if you are just working as an individual and don't really think of yourself as setting up a business, you kind of are de facto a sole proprietorship. So you don't really have to set it up in a formal sense. You don't have to register it. You don't have to do those kinds of things, but you still will be considered as a self-employed individual as basically being the same thing as a sole proprietorship. But sometimes people want to register these things. They want to maybe get a business number and that kind of thing. And we can talk a little bit about that. So when you're organizing your business or your self-employment status, you need to make a choice if you want to become for-profit or not-for-profit. And that's in terms of your official structure, because many people are not-for-profit initially, but that's not the plan. The plan is to earn a living, but sometimes it takes time to do that. So, but if you really want to be a not-for-profit business, effectively you have to set up a corporation, and you have to have a mandate that you will be not making profit, and you have to have a board of directors, and you can't basically own that corporation. So it's not yours. You can work in it, you can be on the board, but it's really an entity separate from yourself, and obviously you're going to be conducting business in such a way that you could be paid if you're an employee and the board approves you as an employee, but and you could make a living that way, but the corporation itself is not designed to generate profit, which is not to say that it doesn't sometimes have some profits that it can save as in reserve for various contingencies when it might need more funding and so on. So that's one kind of a situation. But I would think, looking at the list of what most of you are doing and what you're interested in, that chances are you might more likely be wanting to go with a for-profit choice, and you were going to choose between a sole proprietorship, a partnership, or a corporation. So I want to just spend a little bit of time talking a bit about some of the differences between these things. So let's focus on a sole proprietorship, and I have partnerships lumped in here because essentially they operate in the same kind of way, except that there's more than one person involved. But I'm going to start just with the sole proprietorship. The whole thing about sole proprietorships is that the business and you are the same thing. You're the same thing legally, and you're the same thing financially. Which means that if somebody wanted to sue your business, they are suing you because you are one and the same entity. And it means that if you earn money in your business, that is your income, again, because you're one and the same entity. And it also means that the business does not file any kind of separate business tax because you're the same thing as the business. So you just file your personal income tax as you always would. And just part of your personal income tax is you include a form called a T2125, and it's just a form about your self-employment income, and it just goes inside your personal tax return. So you get taxed on whatever the net profits are in your business because that is considered your earned income. So basically, sole proprietorships, you're the same as the business. By contrast, sole proprietorship, sorry, I should say, and partnerships. And in partnership, you share the financial, it's 50-50 or whatever your partnership blend is, but you're both 100% accountable for all debts, and you're both accountable for any legal issues, which means if your partner didn't have money and you did, people would come after you because you're both 100% accountable. So the contrast with this is the corporation. And we might see corp at the end of the name or inc at the end of the name, and that's how we know a business is a corporation. And in this case, a business is not the same thing as you. You're completely separate entities. The business's money is not your money, and the business, any legal liability that would accrue to the business is not, in most cases, your legal liability. I say in most cases because there are a few exceptions. If you had, it was a case of gross negligence, you might be personally held responsible for something that happened through the business. And even with the money, if you took money that was not yours and did things with it, you could be personally responsible for that. But essentially, you and the business are separate things. So this is a very important distinction. This means that the business in a corporation files its own business tax return, and you file your own personal tax return. And if you get paid by the business, you get paid as an employee, and you get a T4 slip like all the other employees, and you report that on your personal tax return. Because what it's all about is both legal and finance, those are the reasons why typically people will incorporate or stay a sole proprietor. So if you are leaving money in your business, not taking it out to live on, or if you're maybe the business is very equipment heavy or really super inventory heavy, which also means there's monetary value being left in the business, then you might look at incorporating. But for most people who are self-employed, especially at the beginning, you need to take the money out of the business to live on. That is how you're earning money. And so typically it doesn't make a difference if you're incorporated or not, because if you're taking the money, you're still going to pay personal income tax on it. So the idea is that corporate tax rates are a little bit lower than personal tax rates, but that really won't have an impact on you if you still need to take the money out for yourself as your wages. But there's another impact from these entities being separate or being the same as you. And let's look at what happens if you die or if one of the owners leaves the corporation, let's say when there's more than one owner. So if you have a corporation and somebody dies or somebody leaves, the corporation is still left standing there. It still exists. You could sell your shares in the corporation to somebody else. I mean, various agreements can have some limits on some of these things, and you can structure it so that if you have more than one person in your corporation, that you have some control over how these things happen. But essentially, because the corporation is separate, it's not tied to you. This means you could also sell the business. But if we look at a sole proprietorship, basically, if you die or if you were to have a partner who left the business is basically doesn't exist anymore, because you are your business or the partners are the business. If you leave or if a partner leaves, then the business just doesn't exist anymore. Now, that's technical and that's legal. Sometimes the perception in the marketplace is that the business does still exist, but it can't really. What happens is essentially the original business gets closed and then someone reopens it under the same name. And so that's how we can have a change in ownership or a change if a partner leaves and the other partner stays. It looks like the business continues, but really they have to close it and open the new one because it is tied to the individuals. Which means you also can't really sell a sole proprietorship or a partnership. You can sell the assets of it independently, but you can't sell the business as a whole because it doesn't exist without you. So basically, someone could buy the assets and they could even buy the name, and then you'd close the business and then they would reopen it. So that's a little bit about the different structures that we can use for a for-profit business, sole proprietorship, partnership, and corporation. One last thought I'd like to leave you with here is just my experience with partnerships is that they tend not to be long-lasting. It's not to say I haven't known some partnerships that have existed. In fact, one of the first businesses that I helped was way back in, I think, 1996, and they're still going strongly today as a partnership. However, most of the partnerships that have survived have been family or partnerships where people are family members, and pretty much almost every other partnership I know eventually people just either they stopped getting along or they had different plans in their life. They needed to go a different direction, so the partnership just doesn't continue. So I just put this out as a slight warning, I guess, about setting up a partnership. It's not that one should never do it, but there's many other ways to work with people in a business. You can have all kinds of collaborative relationships and project-based partnerships that don't involve an actual partnership structure. So if your partner's in a corporation, then there's some more safety measures built in there, but even those could be challenging, but that could be all right. But I think if you're not going to incorporate, you're probably best to be a sole proprietor and then just work project by project with someone you want to work with, or have them be an employee or subcontract them. But there's other kinds of ways to work with people, which is the main reason usually why people want a partnership, right? Is they want to share some of the experiences, but a formal partnership, I think, is often trouble. And then just the last thing I want to say about business structures, I sometimes get a question about social enterprises, and people want to know how to set up a social enterprise. So here's the thing, really, there is no structure currently in Canada that is called a social enterprise. You can't set it up that way. You either set up a for-profit or a not-for-profit. But the good thing is that any of these forms can be a social enterprise. In fact, my company, Learning Initiative, has always been a social enterprise. And when I set it up in the beginning of 1995, we didn't even have the term social enterprise. People weren't even using that. So I didn't even know that's what it was called. But in fact, it was a social enterprise. So that has to do with really the motivation of the company is what makes it a social enterprise, and what their mandate is, and what kinds of things they value. If your sole value in your company is essentially profit based, then you would not be considered a social enterprise. But if what you're doing, if there are other values than the bottom line, and if they drive your company, then that is what can allow you to be considered a social enterprise. So it's not really a structure that exists yet as any kind of a separate legal or financial entity, but it is something that you can call yourself if you your mandate and your values are in line with that. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about structuring your business or your self-employment. Does anybody have a question about any of that? Seems like no. Okay.
I think everyone's good.
Okay. So then let's talk a little bit about hiring and being hired. So we often look at contracts, and this is where I think there's confusion in people that I talk to. I'll ask them, well, so are you self-employed in this particular situation on this project? And they'll say, well, I'm on a contract. But that doesn't answer the question. You can be on a contract and you can be an employee, and you can be on a contract and you can be self-employed. It depends on the nature of the contract and your relationship with the person who's contracting you. Essentially, what it comes down to is the employer-employee relationship. And this affects you if you are the one being hired on a contract, and also if you're the one doing the hiring on a contract. Are you hiring someone as a self-employed individual or as a business, or should they really be your employee? And I've put a link in the slide deck here that will take you to the government website, CRA, where you can get the information not only about casual labor, but also there's a link inside that document to the employer-employee relationship document that they put together, which is extensive in how many pages it is, but they do go through very, very carefully all of the kinds of considerations that you have to take into account when you're deciding, is someone an employee or are they a self-employed individual? And this, I can't give you like, it's not just like a set number, like these three things and for sure you'll be an employee or you'll be self-employed. It has to do with the scope of them and how many of them, of the criteria you fall under. So there's things like, does the person who's contracted you dictate your hours of work and your days of work? So that's one factor. That by itself won't decide it for sure, but that's one factor. So if the person hiring dictates a lot of those things, that leans it more towards you being an employee, or the person you're hiring being an employee. If you can refuse the work, if you can refuse work, that means you're more likely to be self-employed than an employee. If you have to provide your own equipment, you're more likely to be self-employed. If the employer, if the other entity provides the equipment, then that's more likely an employee relationship. So there's all of these different kinds of factors, and it really depends how many of them come into play and how extreme they are. All of that, it dictates whether someone is considered to be an employee or self-employed. Now, if you're in a situation where you're on you're the person being contracted, it doesn't really affect you if you're self-employed or not, in the sense that if you were supposed to be an employee and you're not, you will not get in trouble. It's the person who's contracting you that will get in trouble. You can tell if you're an employee because, as I said, you have deductions taken off your pay, you don't invoice them, and you get a T4 at the end of the year. If you don't get any of those things, then you are self-employed. So your only responsibility, if you're self-employed, is to make sure that you report your earnings to the government. But if the relationship was such that you should have been an employee, as I said, you wouldn't get in trouble. However, if you're the one doing the hiring and you just want the person to be a contract worker because then you don't have to worry about payroll and you don't have to worry about deductions and all of that, that's okay, but you have to make sure that CRA would also agree that that person you're hiring is self-employed and shouldn't be, in fact, an employee. So you want to make sure that they have enough freedom to decide when they work and how they work, and that they're providing perhaps some of their own equipment and that they can turn you down, and all of those kinds of things. So it's important, if you're hiring that person to do that work, and if you think they are self-employed, you really want to know, because if your relationship is such that they should be an employee, then now you're the one who's hired them. Now you would be the one in trouble if you didn't do the deductions and remit things to CRA and so on. And after the fact, if it was decided that that person should have been an employee, you could be liable for all the CPP that you should have taken off their paycheck, and the CPP you need to contribute on their behalf, and the EI and so forth. So that could come as a shock later to find out you suddenly owe all this money, plus you never did take it off their checks. And if you can't go back and get it from them, you would just have to pay it yourself. So it's important to know when you're working with people, is it really legitimate that they're not your employee? Do they have other customers, for example? That's another good test. But if in the end you're not completely sure, you don't feel comfortable, you can always talk to CRA and ask them to do an assessment, and they'll interview you, they'll interview the other person, and then they'll come up with their judgment about whether the person is an employee or is self-employed, or whether you are an employee or are self-employed. And then you can feel confident of that, and you get that in writing from them, and then you don't have to worry about it. The other thing to think about too, I think, is people seem to have a misapprehension maybe a little bit about casual labor, and they'll say, well, I don't have to put this person on payroll because I'm not hiring them for the whole year. Like, they're only working for me these 3 days or this 2 weeks or whatever it is. But actually, the current definition of casual labor under the law is it has to be the fact that it's not regular, it may never be repeated, and it can't benefit your business. So it has to be actually that you hired someone to like clean your windows at home or something, has nothing to do with your business. So that's a little different than how the definition used to be a number of years ago. So as a business, most of us would never be hiring anyone in a way that would be casual labor. So basically, they're either an employee and then we need to put them on payroll, or they are self-employed, they have their own business. If I hire someone to develop a logo for me, and that person's a graphic designer and she has all her own customers, well, I don't have to worry about her being my employee, because 1, she could turn down the job if she didn't want it. 2, she uses her own equipment. 3, she decides her own hours. Or, there's all kinds of things. She's going to invoice me and so forth. So, and key, of course, she has other customers. So I know that I can feel confident with that I can just sign a contract with her or have an agreement, and she invoices and I pay. But if I'm getting someone to do work for me and it's not clear that they're in that kind of a situation of already having their own business, then I need to really look at, perhaps this is an employee, and what are my obligations if it is. So we have quite a few obligations as an employer. Some of these are going to vary from province to province. So we want to make sure that we're aware of whatever the Ontario labor laws are, if we're operating in Ontario, around wage rates. And interestingly, with the new budget, it looks like the minimum wage will be going up to $15, but across the country. But also things like minimum hours, holidays, vacation pay rates, all of these kinds of things. So that's something that you need to be always aware of what is the current labor laws. You know, how many hours does someone have to work if you've called them in and then you decide you don't need them and you're going to send them home. All of these sorts of things. There's also our deductions that we have to make sure we do, like the Canada Pension Plan amount we have to take off the paycheck, and as an employer we have to match that amount, and the EI that we take off the paycheck, and as an employer we not match it, we pay 1.4 times the amount we take from the employee, we contribute on their behalf, and then the tax deductions that we have to take, federal and provincial. And one thing as a responsible employer that you might want to consider is making sure that you know when people are working for you, particularly if it's on a part-time and ad hoc basis, that you find out if they have other work, because they probably do. And in which case you want to take their tax deductions, the amount that comes when somebody is what we call zero rated, because otherwise you won't be taking enough tax off and they will get a nasty shock when they do their tax return, because they will probably not get a refund but will owe money. And that's one of the challenges in our gig economy of people working so many different jobs and not having enough tax taken off at source and then having to pay at tax time. So those are just conversations you can have with your prospective employees. And there's in fact a government form, a TD1 form that you get them to fill out, and you can see really at what rate you should be taking deductions and taxes and so forth. There's also WSIB to consider. So as a self-employed person, you are not required to cover yourself. However, you are required to cover your employees, and you can opt to cover yourself. So that would be something to look into if you are hiring, and to make sure that you find out what your rates would be, because the rates differ from type of business to type of business. And then as an employer, you're responsible not only for, of course, paying your employees and giving them a record of their payment and what all the deductions were, but then giving them the T4s at the end of the year, by the end of February, and writing up a T4 summary which goes to the government, so that the T4s get also sent, like all the information gets sent to CRA as well as to your individual employees. That's really just all to do with the actual payroll. Of course, as an employer, you have other obligations as well around privacy and around the Disabilities Act in Ontario. And so there's a number of other legal things that you would want to look into if you were hiring. I don't know how many of you are already hiring or will be, but certainly that's an area that to explore if you're putting people on payroll. You can run payroll very easily yourself now, in terms of just knowing how much to pay the employee and how much to deduct, because CRA has a great payroll deductions online calculator that you can use, and that calculates everything for you. So that is super easy now. But just keeping track of all what it is, because at the end of the year you have to summarize everything, and you have to know how many weeks people worked and how many hours and so forth, because if someone left, or if you had to lay them off, or if they just requested a record of employment, you would need to provide that. So there's a lot of tracking of information that it's important to do, and you may want to have the advice of a good bookkeeper around payroll. Maybe you want to give over part of the payroll jobs to a bookkeeper, or at least you might want to pay someone to consult you to get everything set up properly, so that you know you're tracking all the right information before you get too deeply into it. Any questions about that?
Hello, Anne.
Hi, Mo.
How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
A great presentation, by the way. This is really, really cool stuff. I have a couple of questions for you. How long does it take to incorporate a business?
Well, it depends what way you go with incorporation. So you can incorporate yourself. You can incorporate at the provincial level, or you can incorporate at the federal level. And you can do it yourself online. Let's say a federal incorporation you can do for $350, I think, might be $360 now. $350 or $360, and you can do it online, and you can do it pretty quickly. And it's good within, I think, a day or two.
Okay.
Now, as long as you meet all the requirements and everything. But the thing is that that's the quick way you can do it, and that's easy, and you can just incorporate it as an owner who runs a business. However, you might want to have accounting advice or legal advice depending on the scope of the corporation that you want to set up and what all you plan to do with it. So I always think it's a good idea to talk to your accountant and to talk to your lawyer around what you're considering, because they may have suggestions in terms of how you should structure your corporation. The other thing to consider is too, for people who have family, they may want to set up certain things at the beginning when they set up that corporation that takes their family into consideration. So in other words, you can do it very simply yourself. However, you may not have all the accounting or legal knowledge to put everything in place and to structure it in such a way that is going to be the corporation that you really want going forward. So I always think it's good, whether you pay for the accountant or lawyer to do all the work for you, that's one thing. But at least I would certainly want to get their advice before I would go through and set something up myself.
And what's the difference between a provincial incorporation and a federal?
A provincial incorporation just works within the province of Ontario, but if you might want to be doing business nationally, then you might want to have a federal incorporation.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't talk really cost, because sole proprietorship, it's free, but you can register a name for $60 in the province of Ontario. But if you're running under your own name, of course, you don't need to register a name. And so then it's actually free just to have a sole proprietorship. And that's why many people start that way. But I could see why, for films and so on, why you might want to be looking at a corporation. And you also want to consider too, what's the level of liability that you might incur in your business. So if your business, if there's not much that could cause harm, you may be safe in a sole proprietorship, but if your business really could potentially cause damage or harm to people, then you might want to have that protection of the limited liability of the corporation.
Well,
I just want to say, of course, you can buy business insurance as well, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I had an incorporation for about 25 years.
Yes.
And at the end, I wasn't doing much with it, but it was costing me about $3,000 to get the books done on it. So I dissolved it.
Yes.
But now all of a sudden I'm getting a new urge there. And if this thing goes somewhere, I don't know if it will, but I believe that would be the way to go to incorporate again. Yeah.
Yes. So let's say if you get a lawyer and an accountant involved, a corporation cost could be anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000, depending on the scope. But sometimes it's a little cheaper if you buy a numbered company, like Ontario 65239 Limited, one of those, because sometimes those corporations exist what we call on the shelf. That, in other words, they've already been set up, but someone's not using them. That numbered company, the shell is sitting there, and you can buy that. And sometimes that's a little bit cheaper way to get that incorporation.
Okay.
But the hard costs, like that go to the government, are around $350, $360. But then it's whatever else the lawyer or the accountant charges you.
So an accountant can handle an incorporation, right?
Some will and some won't. So I know some in town that do that.
Okay.
And then some that say, no, you should be going through a lawyer.
Okay.
Yeah. So it a little bit depends on the people and, what they're comfortable with. And like, all accountants in town, they're not all specialists in the same areas. They all have their sort of little niche. So.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm thinking maybe, I think this is around your normal break time. It's 5 to 8. So maybe, and how long do you usually take, Linda? Like 10 minutes or 15 minutes? Sorry, you're muted there.
Sorry about that. I thought I was fine. So we usually take about 10, 12 minutes. So yeah, we'll come back maybe at 7 after.
Okay,
Okay.
sounds good. All right, so we'll continue then.
Okay, sounds good. Everybody go
Okay.
do what you need to do.
Hi, Linda.
Hi there. How's it going?
Good. Is this one also being taped?
Yeah, yeah. This one's also being taped. Yeah.
Okay, good. And this is our last session?
This is our last official session for classes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I have to double check with them. Seeing as we kind of wound up having to do a week later, I will double check what the timing is going to be for people that are submitting their business plans. And then at the end, I'm just going to chat with people about when we'll do some sort of virtual exhibition. So it'll give everybody a little bit of time.
Frank, I saw your email, by the way, and
yeah, I know.
I got the pictures.
Okay, I know. I saw your response. Good.
Okay.
Hi, Ann.
Hi, Frank. Nice to see you.
You too.
So you're not out in the bush today.
Well, I was supposed to go today, but I just had too much on my plate, so I thought I'd get everything organized and done, and I'll go tomorrow. I got a few days. I get the rest of this week. I'll go out. Things I got to get my winter park and my mitts out now.
I know. I know it turned so cold this morning, but is supposed to gradually warm up towards
Yeah.
the end
Yeah.
of the week. So
Well, I'm happy there's no bugs. Once you're in the bush, it'll be 20 below out, and as soon as you go in the bush, it's like, and you start walking, you can open your jacket, it's warmer. So it seems cold, but an ATV ride might be cold. But once I'm in the bush, it'll be pretty good.
yeah.
And there's no bugs and no leaves. I can see 100 meters right through the bush, so that's nice.
Yeah, because when it got warm, I think the bugs started to come out.
Yes.
I encountered black flies on Sunday.
Yeah,
Baby black flies. It's like, oh, I can't believe it. April, that's a first.
yeah, true enough, eh?
Yeah. Last week I was up at a hill. I saw some blueberry plants. The leaves, the buds were just trying to starting to open a little bit.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Just on a one hill where it was nice and sunny.
Oh,
It was
wow.
under a bunch of oak trees and maybe the soil was fertile. Just on the one hill, but they were starting to open. So that means in about 2 or 3 weeks they have the little flowers. We'll probably get a frost in May. They'll fall off, and
Wow.
they won't have any berries. So
Huh,
Not good.
no. No, when the weather does this weirdness, it does confuse the plants for sure.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was quite the presentation that Ivy had. Moy, she got quite artistic, and especially with those little dots. That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
really, really good.
Yeah, it's a very old method, right?
Mm.
It goes like way, way back. The French artist, I think, was really famous for it and that. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It is a lot of work, but then so are many different forms of art, right?
You're right. It's your Surat.
There you go.
Thank you, Frank.
It was very nice.
I'm really sorry that I missed seeing that, Ivy. I came on for 7. I thought we were starting at 7, but I guess you guys started a bit before that.
Yeah, because we were having extra presentations tonight, we started early, and I don't know, Marilyn didn't come tonight, but her presentation should have been here as well. So, anyways, I'll have to check and see what happened with her. But we taped these, so everybody that isn't able to come, they get to
Right.
still see it. So, works out pretty good.
So Linda, I have something I would like to share.
Okay.
I bought a tripod.
Oh, fantastic.
It's very funny because this contract that I'll be doing in May and June, I was able to hire a friend of mine who's going to be my production assistant, and we're going to go on the road. And I thought it was going to be something a little bit more high quality standard. Remember in my production, I was saying I
Yes.
really had to boost my technical skills. Turns out that she's fine with shooting with my phone and with my camcorder.
Wow.
So I don't have to go into that expense and that learning because the learning curve was going to be a little bit steep.
Yeah.
So I think I'm still going to stick with learning Final Cut Pro to
Yeah.
be able to edit these. And then when I'm ready to film something else, then I'll hire somebody to be my mentor and to give me on the job training as they filmed for me. So I got a tripod.
That's great. That's great. Well, I mean, and this turns out to be pretty cool too, that, I mean, it allows you to kind of get that job done without the learning curve right now.
Exactly. So, and I was able to put together my whole, how do you say in English, devis. When you say how much everything is going to cost and you estimate going on the road, renting a car.
Oh yeah, yeah, like your budget quote.
Voila. And because I was doing this training online and because of this training, I was really confident to say, okay, I could do it this way. And I knew what everything costs and how I could go about. And she accepted my proposition and it's gonna be
Excellent.
wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's really good. Thank you for the good feedback that it was helpful.
Yeah, it was big time.
Right. So any of you that are afraid to start doing, the budgets or any quotes, there you go. You've got an endorsement. I am going to be assigning a little bit of homework for people because I know not everybody's going to do their business plan. But I do want to see that you are actually practicing some of it. So. We've got a couple more minutes, but I don't know if everybody's here, we could just go. Is everybody here? It's hard to tell when you're all
We're giving thumbs up and claps for you if they're here.
yeah, okay. Okay, I think we're good to go.
Okay. All right, so I will share again. So we've just left off here. So now we're going to go on to a little bit of a new topic. There we go. Talking a little bit about contracts, because we talked about contract workers and people having contracts and so on. And contracts are a thing that we might come across quite a bit in business. Because you can have contracts with employees, you can have contracts with customers, you can have contracts with suppliers. So there's all kinds of people with landlords and so on, all kinds of occasions for contracts. So what is a contract? In most of Canada, except for Quebec, contract law is all based upon English common law, and essentially a contract is just an agreement. So it could be a verbal agreement, it could be a written agreement. That doesn't really change whether or not the contract is binding, whether it's verbal or written. However, of course, those of us that consult with businesses, we often recommend that you have contracts in writing because it's a lot easier to see what's involved, to review it, to think about it, and then to follow up on it if there's any issues, if both parties have everything written out and you've taken the time to do that. So while a verbal agreement is binding, it's probably recommended that for anything for a significant amount of work or significant amount of money, that you have something in writing. So what makes a contract binding? So it's not the fact that it's on paper or that people have signed on it, because as I said, it could be verbal and a handshake. What makes it binding is essentially 4 factors. One, is it legal? Is everything within the contract about doing legal things? So if you made a contract with somebody, for example, to steal something, you could have this agreement that they were going to steal, but you could never enforce that agreement, enforce that contract, because you're asking them to do something that's illegal. So you can never be held to something that is illegal. And often in contracts, you will see that kind of language near the end that, the contract is all set out and all what you're doing, but that you are bound by the laws of the province or country that you're operating in. And if anything is deemed to be illegal, then it's not going to be enforceable and so forth. So you'll sometimes see a little clause specifically speaking to that. That clause doesn't have to be there. It will always be the case that you can't enforce a contract that causes someone to do something illegal, but by putting it there, that clause, that kind of draws it to our attention. So that's the first thing. To be binding, whatever's being done within the bounds of the contract has to be legal. The second thing is mutuality. So it has to be that if there's 2 parties in a contract, whatever the one party is contributing, that there's also something that the other party is doing. So if I provide these dance lessons, because I saw Amanda's presentation, to your child, you will give me so much money at such and so intervals. So now there's something happening on both sides, and there's a mutuality to this contract. So there are obligations and responsibilities from both parties, or particularly if you're working with a bookkeeper or a graphic designer, you want to be clear about what are my obligations on my end of it? What do I have to provide you with? And what are your obligations on your end? And what do you have to provide me with? That's something that I think, in my experience, many businesses don't maybe adequately do with their customers. They operate a lot on verbal agreements, not written contracts, and that's okay, but they don't really clearly define everybody's responsibilities. A lot of it is left as an assumption, and if you're a business owner, you can assume that customers know way more about what you do than they really do. So if I'm a bookkeeper, I might assume that you understand the information you have to give me, but chances are you don't, unless I train you and tell you about that. Or if I'm a graphic designer, I might assume that you realize that, of course, I can't make 1,500 changes because that would take up way too much time. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but even I might not be able to make 5 significant changes. Maybe I'm only comfortable to make 2 or 3 significant changes. Well, if that's the case, I got to make sure that I lay this out. This is what I can do. This is what you need to do. So this mutuality of what both parties have to contribute, part of that is necessary for a contract to be binding. And then there must be consideration. And when we're talking consideration, that basically means money. It can be actual money that is exchanged at the time of the signing the contract, or it could be the promise of some money being paid for the work at various dates. And so, but we do need that consideration. And then finally, the last category that makes something binding, or last aspect, is capacity. And what is being referred to here in the law is basically mental capacity. Are you in a place that you can understand what you're agreeing to, and same for the other person? So do you have the presence of mind and the sanity to be able to know what you're getting into and to agree to it? So if you have those 4 things, if it's legal, if there's mutuality, if there's consideration identified and will be looked after, and if there's mental capacity to enter into the agreement, then a contract is binding. Like we said, whether it's verbal, whether it's written. But of course, if it's written, it's a lot easier to go back over the items and to make sure that people are following. And if there is a situation where there's a breach of contract, if it's minor, you may overlook it. You could choose to, but if it's major, you may want to do something about it. You may want to take the person to court, or take it to a higher level. So then if you've got something in writing, it's a lot easier for you to be able to do that. So significant agreements could be written up. You can use forms. There's lots of forms you can download, or Self-Counsel Press has a great publication of legal forms that you can use for your business. But also, sometimes these things are done perfectly adequately in a letter. So a letter could be a type of count as a type of contract, and you can get both parties to sign on that letter, a letter of agreement. And you could also write up your own kind of simple contracts. The best contracts are contracts that are written in easy to understand English, not full of legal complicated jargon. So you want to make sure it's really clear. If it's something that you're really concerned about, or that has a big implication on you or your business, you may want to hire a lawyer to look it over and to make sure that you haven't left something out that should be there, or to get even to help you set up some initial templates. So that's kind of contracts in business. Before I move on from that, is there anything that anybody wants to ask about contracts, types of contracts, signing contracts, anything related to contracts? Because probably a lot of you do end up having a lot of agreements for your kinds of work, whether they're verbal or written. You're probably agreeing a lot with people on, if they're selling products for you as some kind of a commission, rate, or if you're getting people to work for you, or if you're setting up shows. Evelyn?
Figured out the hand thing. Yeah, we did have some contracts when I had my business running. And how long do you normally keep them for? Is it also for 7 years or something after the term is ended, or does it matter?
Actually, that is a really great question, and I don't, in fact, know the answer to that, because I don't know that there's a legal length of time. I'm not sure if somebody were going to, because the only reason you'd be really saving it after the fact would be if someone were going to take you to court over it. And I don't know what the statute of limitations is for that. In most areas that I'm familiar with for going to court, there is often that 6 to 7 year rule, but for a contract, I don't know. It could be 2 for all I know. So
I'm just going to chip in there, because this would have an impact on your income tax. You would want to keep it for the same period of time. Okay.
Yeah. So if it relates to your income tax, but sometimes contract may not, but if it, for most of the time it would, right? But if it does, that would mean, we all say 7 years as a rough guideline, but it's not really 7 years. You've probably covered this already in the course, but it's 6 years after the date of your last notice of assessment. So that's relevant because sometimes, as I actually had to do just this year, I had to refile my 2017 income taxes because I discovered something that I did not realize was a deductible expense, and discovered it was. And so I refiled, which means when I get that notice of assessment, I've still got to keep all those 2017 records 6 years after this notice of assessment in 2021. So it'll end up being longer than 7 years. But if you file on time, effectively it becomes 7 years for sure. But yeah. Of course, nowadays, if we have things digitally, so storage is not such of an issue. Well, I guess globally, storage is an issue because of the power that is used by the grid for all the internet storage. However, as your own business, you may not need to store even outside of your computer. So it may be possible to store things and not have it be all the boxes that I have down in my basement. Anybody else? Okay, so I thought it might be interesting to sort of finish off tonight a little bit by talking a bit about negotiating these contracts. And look, because I think, as artists, unfortunately, in many cases, artists are sometimes taken advantage of and not necessarily super well paid in our society. And there is an organization that I want to tell you about actually at the end of this that is can be really helpful around some of those things. But we're often in a position to negotiate contracts. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about negotiation. I don't know if this is something you've covered much already in your course, but essentially there's 2 main ways of negotiating things. One way is what we call positional negotiation. And that's probably the type of negotiation that most people are familiar with. We see that in we're buying something secondhand on Kijiji, and the person asks for $160 for it. And we say, well, how about, will you take $90? Then we end up sawing it off usually somewhere around 125, right? Like that's that meet in the middle type of negotiation. And that's kind of a very crude example of positional negotiating. But essentially, you take a position, the other party takes a position, and then you bit by bit try to shift your position slightly until you can meet. And that's what usually results in meeting in the middle. We've also seen this a lot with labor management negotiations. If it's too positional, sometimes they don't even ever come to an agreement. So sometimes one party takes a position and they stick in that position and you can't get anywhere with them. Or this happens also in divorces, right? And where people will stick in a position and it doesn't move forward. But that's one type of negotiation, and that can be effective if you're comfortable with that, if you're good at it, or if there's no power imbalance between you and the other party, or at least it can be in your favor if you have more power. Certainly, positional negotiation does not work as well if you are the weaker party. So what's much more effective and a more interesting style of negotiation is what we call interest-based negotiation. And some of you may have come across this if you're familiar with the Harvard Negotiation Project. And this was developed, or it's currently run by Harvard, MIT, and Tufts University. But it's often known under the brand of Harvard. And this is like a really radically different way of thinking about negotiating. And negotiating is a thing that we do as self-employed people all the time. So we have to negotiate when we hire someone new. We negotiate when we collaborate with people on projects. We negotiate with suppliers. We negotiate with customers. It's like we can't get outside of this. In fact, even in life, we're negotiating all the time. We negotiate with our kids. We negotiate with our partners and so forth. But especially as a business owner. So when you start to focus on interest-based negotiating, it takes a whole different tone, and it actually becomes something that should leave at the end both parties feeling like they got the best of the deal, and you build bridges instead of burning bridges when you use interest-based negotiation. People are happy to negotiate with you again. It builds things for the life of the relationship, and and it just basically reduces conflict. So I'm just going to look at the method. There's basically 4 key points in this method. I'm obviously not going to go into it in detail. This is something that you can have a whole workshop on, but just to understand a bit about it, the first thing that people do is they separate the people from the problem. So my little bonhomme there is like really pushing, struggling to make sure people are separated from the problem, because that's very hard for us to do as human beings. We tend to see the problem as tied up in the person, especially if someone's not doing what we want them to do or not offering what we want them to offer us. It feels like that personality, that person, and all their emotional content and their background and their psychology is all part of the problem that we're trying to deal with. So we want to try to tease those things apart, separate them out, and see the problem as what I need are these needs met, and this is not what it seems to be happening. And then the person and what are their thing, we start to look at the person as a human being and see, well, where may they be coming from, and what are their concerns, and what's going on with them, and try to pull that, separate that out from the problem. And then that really allows us to do this key thing, and this is where the method gets its name from, interest-based negotiation. It allows us to focus on the interests of all the parties involved. So the key thing about this style of negotiation is you don't ever start with a position, or you don't stick in a position. You don't say, this is what I want, the other person, well, this is what I want. What you spend time on is trying to uncover what the needs are of all the parties, what their interests are, what do they care about. So if I'm hiring somebody and I want them to be my employee, I would have various interests. I might be needing help in certain areas. I might want to feel confident that they are reliable, that they're responsible, that they're going to deliver work to me out of a certain quality. But I might want to pay them what it's worth, but I may also be stuck with a budget that doesn't allow me to pay over a certain amount. And maybe I could give them all of the amount in that budget line, but maybe I feel unsure because maybe I'm not sure, are they going to work out? And do I need to keep a little bit back in case I have to bring someone else on? Like, these would be all my interests that might be going on in the background. And then the person I want to hire, maybe they've just, they've got a family to feed, and they just lost their last project, and so they really need this project, but they need a certain amount of money for it, and so they have concerns and interests and needs. And what you do with this kind of negotiating is you try to have all those conversations that pull out what people really care about. People think they care about terms like money, number of weeks, like the sort of the facts of the agreement. But all of those things, they only care about those things because they have actually other concerns going on in the background. Like, my concern is I need to pay my rent, or my concern is that I want to make sure I have work for the next 5 weeks, or there's all different kinds of, or my concern is I want to make sure I have every Friday off because I need to do such and so with my family. So we all have concerns, and if we bring those on the table, then we can often see ways to create options where our interests align. And we can look down all the interests and see, okay, we're aligned on maybe 5 out of 6 things, and there's only one thing where our interests seem to be in conflict. So that makes the negotiating a lot easier, because you can see where you're not in conflict, and then you can see clearly where you are in conflict. And then at that point, you can work together to create options for mutual gain. So I want to think outside the box. I want to think creatively of as many different types of agreements and arrangements that we could come up with that could potentially meet both of our needs, our concerns, and our interests. Now, I say we could do this together. So if I'm negotiating with someone, if I can get them on side to help work with me to invent these options, that's the best thing, because then we're on the same side of the table, looking at a whiteboard, trying to come up with options, and we feel aligned. We already feel like we're on the same team, so it's a lot easier to get an agreement. But if you are trying to negotiate with somebody who is maybe a very seasoned and hardened positional negotiator, someone who is not familiar with interest-based negotiation, they may not want to do that, or they may not see a value in that initially, but that does not preclude you from still coming up with all these options. So this is the beauty of this method, is it doesn't matter if the other person is not playing by these rules, you can still do it as well. And when we can show lots of options to people, then sometimes they will see something that's more attractive than what they originally had in mind, where they're not going to be able to get an agreement. So we come up with all of these options for mutual gain. And then the last piece of interest-based negotiation is that you really insist on using objective criteria for deciding what is fair, what is not fair, what we should do, what we should not do. So if, let's say, you're arguing over an amount of payment, or negotiating over an amount of payment, then you may want to look at, well, what are industry standards? What are other people paid? What are you paying other people? Like, you try to base all the decisions that you're negotiating on facts that can be corroborated, I guess, outside of you and the other person. So you try to turn to other things, precedents, statistics, other kinds of data that would maybe give you a basis for saying, well, therefore, this is why we should do this way. So you're trying to make it a little more objective and not just about your personal take or their personal take, or you're trying to make something rational as opposed to emotional. So often we do feel emotional about the thing that we're negotiating, but when we're trying to make a decision about how we should do things fairly and what option we choose, we want to use some kind of objective criteria, some sort of rational approach for how we would decide it. So that's, in very briefly, in a quick nutshell, a little bit of a primer on interest-based negotiation. And I would strongly recommend, if this is something that does interest you, that you follow up on this and you can read and learn more about it, because it certainly has a very powerful impact when you start to implement it, even if you don't master it, and even in just a very small way. You'll start to see differences. You try it out at home or with something small. Is there somebody in the chat there? Yes. Okay. So there's one other piece that I wanted to let you just think about, and this also comes from the Harvard Negotiation Project. It's what they call BATNA, which is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And I think this often happens when we're self-employed, when we really, really, really want the contract to work out. So we're trying to negotiate something and we really want it to work. And that can make it difficult for us to perhaps stick to objective criteria or to work through interest-based negotiation because we want it to work so badly. And that can get in the way, basically. So what can help with this is if you actually spend time in advance working out what would be your best alternative to coming to an agreement with this person. So let's say I can't come to an agreement with this person. What would be my best alternative that I could come up with? So maybe I want this gig. I'm going to be hired to do animation for this film. I really, really want it. So I have to say to myself, okay, so let's say I can't get it at a rate that is that I'm comfortable with. So how do I not undersell myself? Well, I could say, okay, let's say I don't take this deal. What could be my alternative? Well, that now opens up the opportunity that perhaps I could find work with somebody else for this period. And maybe there would be other people that want to hire me where I could get a better rate. So if I could look at what the going rate is and I could see how many jobs are currently out there, maybe I, contact my guild and see, oh, okay, there's this many movies coming to town and this is how many people are likely to need me, right? I can then develop a sense of, oh, I do have some alternatives that might be better than selling myself short for way under my sort of desired rate or necessary rate. So basically it's saying, know when to walk away from a deal. When is a deal more harmful to you than it would benefit you? And know what the alternative is. Do you have now opportunity to do something else? Do you, by not going into a deal, save money that could then be used in another way? Let's say I wanted to hire someone to work for me as an assistant and they're going to do some bookkeeping and all these other things and it doesn't work out, we can't agree. Well, I'm going to save the money from hiring that person. Maybe I can use that money elsewise to contract another business to help me instead of having an employee. So there's always an alternative to your agreement, and find out what your best alternative is and look at it in terms of money, opportunity, time, and then that gives you some strength when you're negotiating so that you can stay rational and not get taken advantage of. Yeah, Stephanie, I'm just looking at your chat comment there. And that's sort of an interesting strategy. And I know lots of business people that use that strategy, right? Whether it's, artists or not, if you don't want a job, you just charge a really high price, because that way if they do make you do it, like they do agree, at least you're being paid for doing the thing you don't want to do. But if they don't, you're happy too, right? So anybody have a question about negotiation and what I've been talking about with interest-based negotiation and knowing when to walk away?
I don't know how to do the hand thing except for raise my own hand, but I'm just curious if you could refresh just the second point of it. I was making notes and I missed making
for the method, the second point
of the method. Yeah.
Can I go backwards here? Sorry, I just have to get my mouse working. Just on interests.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So this is part two here is like the key. It's the core of what your negotiating is. You spend 80% of your time working on the interests, getting them out, trying to get them out on the table and visible as much as possible. If people are not used to this style, you know, they will try to hold their cards to their chest really closely sometimes, and they won't convey that. So you have to use a bit of real communication skills and a bit of psychology to get people comfortable talking about what their real interests are. Sometimes you can even suggest, like, I'm thinking maybe you're concerned about this. And then they might say, oh, no, I'm not worried about that, but I am worried about this. You know, but you have to kind of tease it out sometimes. But this is really the core, because once this is laid out, it is so much easier to come up with good alternatives for how to agree. And then the two of you are almost working on them together. I had to use this, I guess, most significantly with a landlord in 2016 when we were running the Ontario Self-Employment Benefit Program for the province in the Sudbury area. And, you know, our self-employment benefit program here was very successful, but provincially, the whole province decided to cancel the entire program everywhere because there were some jurisdictions where they felt it was not being effective. Anyway, they canceled the whole thing. And we had a lot of space, and I had to talk with my landlord, you know, because we weren't able to pay that kind of rent, and there was an interim period before we got had other things that we were doing. And so it was very interesting because he came in absolutely set to do this bargaining back and forth and arrive at a middle spot. And I said, oh yeah, I don't want to talk about rents yet. I don't want to talk about those terms. Like, I just want to talk a bit about my situation, and I want to understand like where you're coming from and what's really critical to you. And the more we talked, you know, by the time we'd got all the interests on the table, and he talked a lot about his interests and his concerns, when we got then to this option stage, he's the one offering these other alternatives even more than me, because he's saying, well, but maybe we could do it like this, and we don't want to lose you as a tenant, so maybe we could do this, and we could do this. And anyway, it was super helpful, and it was great, and it got us through that little transition period. So yeah, I just I think it's a really helpful thing. But interest, that's the core part of it all, right? Anybody else with a question about this? So I've included here some helpful resources, and this is the one I wanted to mention to you that I said I wanted to talk a little bit about, because the middle two are just government websites, but they have good information on them. The first one though, ALAS Ontario, and I love the name ALAS. Well, that's their acronym, but they're also funded by a not-for-profit that they created called ALAC. So it's ALAC and ALAS, but it is Artist Legal Advice Services, and they've been set up to offer free legal services to any type of artist in Ontario. They have a fabulous website. They offer events, well, not so much during COVID, but you know, that will be over at some point. They have events. They do have some online stuff, but not as much. But they do have all their legal services, of course, are operating, and they have news and bulletins and information, and it's a great organization to know about and to be involved with. Now the way they can do it partly for free. I mean, partly it's their fundraising side, but they also have people donating time, but they also do use law students. But so you're not necessarily getting like a full-fledged lawyer, but you're getting some bright people there that are, you know, take the legal advice very seriously, and people that are interested in the whole arts field and the law and your rights and protecting all of that. So yeah, I think they're great. And then the bottom one, I want to just say a little bit about. This was the first book that was published out of the negotiation project called Getting to Yes. It's now multiple reprints, and if you can get your hands on it, it's a fabulous primer, and it is still being used by all of the, like, for instance, if you take policy training programs, you're going to be exposed to this, and a lot of like people that are involved in decision making and leadership and so on. So it's still a really core book, and they've since put out some sequels and so forth. And if you do go to the Harvard site that I listed there, you can see there's all kinds of information that you can download for free, and free reports that focus on different aspects of negotiating. So you can actually educate yourself quite a bit around that. But the little book, it's a thin, I don't know if I have it close. Oh yeah, it's a thin little volume. So it's an easy read, great little stories in it and so forth. And it's a good way to get started on all of that. So those are just some resources. And I guess the last thing I just wanted to say before I'll open it out for any other questions is just to let you know a little bit that obviously this is what we do at Learning Initiative. We do workshops and seminars and one-on-one consultations and so forth. But what we also do is deliver the RISE programs in Northern Ontario and Manitoba. So RISE is a national charity, and their focus is on people who have had any history of mental health or addiction challenges. And if somebody fits in that category, that they've ever experienced, anxiety, depression, ADHD, learning disability, anything in the DSM, at some point they self-declare. And if you're also in a position that you would not qualify for a bank loan, then those two are the criteria that would make you potential eligible for RISE programs. And we deliver a lending program that is awesome because, first of all, there's no minimum. I put $100 here because it looks silly to say $1. I don't think someone's ever going to borrow $1. It's too much work to go for it. But you can just borrow a very small amount, or you can borrow up to, the max is $10,000. And they're at bank lending rates. But what's awesome about it is you get all of the help in the application process, working with us to advise you on tweaking your business plan or finishing your business plan, creating projections, all those kinds of things. And then you actually get a mentor, a volunteer mentor assigned to you for the whole first year of your loan. And then you're also eligible for going to workshops. Like, there's all kinds of things involved in the RISE lending program. So I just wanted to let you know about it. It's an awesome program, and it's there to help people succeed in their businesses. And yeah, so just want to let you know a little bit about us and what we do. And I've given you my our email there and phone number, and a RISE link too if you want to check that out. So I realize we've got probably about 15 minutes left in the evening. If there's any other questions, any aspect of business, legalities, or any, I mean, we can talk about any aspect of business. If you have any questions, I'm happy to field them.
I have a question. It's Amanda.
Yes, Amanda.
It was bedtime chaos, so I missed the section where I could ask questions about the business structures. I'm trying to kind of identify what business structure would be best for myself.
For your studio.
Yeah, and so I guess between like corporation, as far as like not getting sued if someone gets injured, but then sole proprietorship, I'm just not sure, or what research I should be doing to kind of decide and figure out what the best option is.
Yep. So, there's a few different things to think about. One is a sole proprietorship is easier and quicker and cheaper to set up. It's also easier, quicker, and cheaper to maintain.
Okay.
So, because if you're going to give your studio a name, so you'll have a business name registration for $60, and then that's pretty much it. That's your only cost. And you can get a business number with CRA just by asking for it. That's free, and you can have an HST number if you can get that. That's free as well. So you can do all of that part, and you would want to check out though. I would want to get insurance quotes to know for business insurance. So you'd want to be looking at probably, people used to say the standard used to be 2 million liability, but it's much more shifting to 5 these days. So I would get a quote and see what they say for $5 million liability and see what that cost is. Because then you have that as an ongoing cost. So you have to compare that as well. But even if you had a corporation, you still may want to have business insurance too. So, because business insurance doesn't just cover you for liability. I mean, there's also like what if your space like burned down, or like you had, I don't know, flooding and you lost record. Like, there's other kinds of things that would be covered as well. So you'd want to consider all of that. You could get legal advice. So you might want to, for instance, contact ALAS and say, I'm thinking of this, but I'm not sure. It's a dance studio. What kind of liability am I likely to be incurring? How frequent is it that studios get sued? Or, you could look a little bit at what's the lie of the land there. To know like how likely that might be. And because it's a cost benefit kind of analysis, like with looking at your risk. And then you want to also decide with the corporation, if you were to go that route, is that something that like you have a little bit of extra cost every year? Like you'd probably want to hire an accountant to do your taxes, and so that's a little bit more costly every year. And then you're going to run payroll to pay yourself. And here's the thing too, are you going to have other teachers, or is it just you initially?
Initially myself, initially, depending, if I need someone right away, then I would add, but the plan is to start with myself and then and kind of go with what the demand is.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing is to look at, let's say you compare yourself to yoga studios. So in town, there's lots of yoga, well, not lots, but there's a number of yoga studios, and many of them are not incorporated. They are sole proprietors. So you would be comparable to something like that. I mean, I know it's not the same, but and then you could look at the other dance studios too and see how many of them are incorporated and how many of them are not, because that would also give you a sense of what's current, right?
As far as getting that information, with like, how do you get that specific information? You could just ask them, or
you could just ask them. You can also see if they're like on their official forms, like on invoices or receipts or anything that's like a legal piece of paper. It should have either say their name with ink after it, or corp. Gotcha. Or would have an Ontario limited number, or like you'd see the number underneath, not their HST number, but their corporation number. So they have to display that. Like when you are an incorporation, you have to let the public know that you're incorporated. So you have to show that in some way on those kinds of documents. So you could tell from that if they were or not.
Okay.
So probably when you start, like it's probably all right to be a sole proprietor. But the other thing is too, will you be leaving money in your business or not? Probably initially you're going to be living on it, right? Like it'll be your wages. So there wouldn't be an accounting reason for being a corporation, but you could look at the legalities and I don't know. I mean, I ran my school as a sole proprietorship for, 14 years. 14 years before we incorporated. And the reason I incorporated was because I wanted to take contracts with organizations that insisted I be a corporation.
Okay.
So like Cambrian, for example, they will not hire self-employed individuals, you have to be a corporation now because they ran into problems with that employer-employee relationship. And they got smacked with having to pay back deductions way back. And so then they said, okay, now you have to be a corporation. And I know, for instance, I have a client who is in the film industry, and he must be an incorporation to join his association. He can't be self-employed. They'll make him be an employee.
Okay, wow.
So, you know, but with your studio, like, you're not contracting out to other agencies and other organizations. So I don't think that would be a factor. But for some of you listening, that could be a factor that could have influenced that decision. So that didn't really give you an answer, but I hope it gave you some things
No,
to
it gave
think
me
about.
good guidance as far as how to go about making that decision. So yes, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
So, Anne, I would have a question.
Yes, Mo.
Yes, so the name of your company is it Rise?
No, the name of my company is Learning Initiative. I'll put it in the chat there. But did you guys got sent a copy of my slide deck? I think, Linda, you sent them.
Yes, I sent them a copy of the slide deck. And,
so you'll see at the end there?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're saying that you're offering negotiating services as well?
We don't do negotiating services. We teach negotiation. Okay. Yeah, and we can advise, like, if you want, let's say you were preparing for a negotiation, then sometimes people will hire us to coach them in advance to help them, you know, prepare for that negotiation.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, so I guess that's it then. I hope that there was something there that was helpful to you and not too dry and dull with all those legalities.
It was excellent.
Thank you, Mo.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay, well, best of luck to all of you then.
Thanks, Anne. That was great. I think, you know, I realized watching their creative talents, it's tough to follow, but this is really important things that will help them in their career. So that's great.
Okay.
Great.
Well, thanks a lot for inviting me in. It was really nice to get to meet you all.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
So I would like the rest of you to stay on because I do want to have a little conversation with everybody. Yeah, it was a lot to take in tonight, but certainly just as Amanda asked the question, I think that that's a question that all of you probably will think about going forward. Anyways, what I wanted to discuss with everybody was whether or not we could pick a time or a date, or we can do it via email too, when we would do our virtual exhibition, because for sure it's, you know, it's pretty difficult to pick a time for whenever we can do that live exhibition. But I think it would be really great for everybody to do that. And so I wanted to give you some time. So that there was no pressure. And I mean, certainly if some of you want to use the presentations that you've provided for us over the weeks of the course, that's fine too, but maybe there's something else that you've decided you'd like to do. So maybe we could just have a little discussion about that and how people feel. If you want to do it maybe a month from now or something like that, or sooner. So you could just give me a bit of feedback, that would be great.
With regards to myself, I'm in. Just let me know when.
Okay.
And I'll be there.
Go ahead.
And that's fine. I also wanted to ask about our business reports or business plans. we're supposed to submit them to Sudbury Regional.
Yeah, I haven't got feedback yet, but I will let you guys know what their deadline is. Because we've gone a week longer than we originally had thought we would. I'm going to ask them to give you a little bit more time. Anybody who's got any concerns, though, for sure, both Kristen and myself, are available to give guidance or any help that you need. So I will be sending you guys an email, probably if not this week, next week for sure, but I would suspect I'll be able to get an answer this week as to when that date will be. I don't know if anybody, I know that Mo, you reached out to them. I don't know if anybody else did reach out to them.
Myself, no.
Oh, I thought you had a conversation with Kristen or an email back and forth about some of what you were doing.
Oh, just at the beginning.
Okay.
But then that's where it stopped. Just at the beginning, I asked her a few questions.
Okay.
But I haven't been in touch with her since.
Okay. No problem. So anybody else have any thoughts about when you'd like to do this? And I figure we will probably go with an hour and a half-ish time frame for everybody. So give everybody enough time to have a little bit of highlight, but not make it an overly long session for the people that we invite.
I would recommend that we do this before the end of the lockdown.
Okay. Yeah,
like while we're still in lockdown, that'll be fine.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a good idea, because once people can get out, they definitely don't want to look at a screen.
Yeah.
Would we just be providing like our art? For like display to people?
Well, I mean, I figure it'll be a little bit of everything. I mean, certainly you can, like, that's why I said if you wanted to show what you had already done, or maybe after this you feel like doing it a little differently, because you've all given each other interesting ideas and stuff like that. For those of you that are performers, perhaps you might want to do something. I mean, maybe Melanie will want to sing for us or read an excerpt out of her book, or something like that. So it's all totally up to each of you as to how you would like to highlight your skills and your talents.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In that regard, like, it would help. So I'm easygoing with timing. I think for me to be more prepared, like to have more to show, for example, the kids book that I'm working on.
Yeah.
I'd have art maybe in a month's time that I could show as like a preliminary art idea. Because I'm working with my artist, obviously.
Yeah.
And but aside from that, like, I'm wondering, as you mentioned, as a performer, like, would we be given a set amount of time to work with? Like, what would I expect maybe for how much I would want to be prepared?
Let me just go backwards again here. So I'm thinking that we're looking at sort of like a 6 or 7 minutes max, just because to be able to get everybody in.
Okay.
So are we each doing like a presentation, or is it just kind of a like people come and see it thing?
I think I'd want to see you actually do a bit of a presentation. I mean, one of the things, like, I think everybody enjoyed learning more about each other. And so I think that it's a good experience for you to also learn how to pitch yourselves. That's also kind of a form of negotiation or marketing. And so I think it's just good practice for you.
Okay.
And it's
so just basically showing people like our business, what we want people to see of our business and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever you'd like to highlight about your business or your talents, or I'm leaving that completely up to you. And I mean, we will send the link out to your family and friends, and I will also share it with our Sudbury Arts Council board and maybe the city and other people that were funders in this. So but I mean, you could still feel like it's a safe place, right? We're not putting out there to the whole public at this point in time. So it's sort of.
Forget it, I changed my mind.
It's Bridget. I just want to Yeah, I was going to ask you if we could invite people, and then you covered that.
Yeah.
And second of all, I do support the virtual session, and I also would be quite happy having a reunion maybe in the fall, and we could meet in person.
Oh, sure. I mean, I do hope that we will keep connected in some format. And because for sure, once the lockdown's done, we will do a real full on exhibition and market it and say to the public, come out and see, come out and see the newest artists in Sudbury, sort of thing. So, that was always what was supposed to happen. And so it just means it's delayed, but that's okay. By that time, you guys are going to be more seasoned, and we'll be all excited to learn a little bit more about what your businesses are. Yes, we will invite the media 100%.
That's great. Thank you.
So if we worked with Mo's time frame, we would be looking at around, just a second, I gotta grab the calendar here. Okay, we could do it for sort of this about a month from now. So it would kind of be like the week of the 17th of May, because that's before the long weekend when the lockdown
Okay.
is.
My dad's birthday is May 24th. I should probably mention that.
Okay, well, yeah, well, we would not do it on the actual holiday.
Oh, right.
But I mean, we could do it if we wanted to do it in a exact month. It could be like the 18th, or it could be if we wanted to do it on the 20th. I wouldn't want to go beyond the 20th because people might take off on the Friday if we actually get out of lockdown. I'm not really holding my hopes out anymore. But so how does that sound to people?
May 18th or 20th?
Yeah, sort of like the,
Sure.
18th, 19th, or 20th. I don't know if anybody's got a preference.
All of those dates work for me.
Okay, is there anybody that those dates do not work for? I hear silence, so I mean, okay. So then let's go maybe with the Wednesday, with the 19th.
Sounds
That
good.
works for me.
Okay. And because it'll be an evening thing, we'll still start it at 7. So I'll keep, I'm going to be keeping in touch with you anyways, but I will keep in touch with you to pin down that, and I'll sort of set up something where we have an actual schedule, so each of you know when in that time frame you're going to present. And of course, some of you, quite a few of you, have learned how to utilize the virtual software stuff, the Zoom. But if anybody is worried or whatever, you can do what you've done all along and provide me a copy. So if, we've got plan B in place and that sort of thing. Anyways, I think that's it for now for me. I don't know if anybody has any questions about the program or about where we go from here, other than Mo's asking about when the business plans are in. And I know that not everyone's going to do a business plan. Any of you that are looking at, really going forward and creating a business, I would encourage you to do that. So that's good. And yes, I will be assigning a little bit of homework, but I'll send you guys that. And I'll give you, you don't have to have it done for next week, but I'll give you a time frame.
I'm curious about the Google Drive. Do we have like unlimited extended access to all that, the files, the documents?
At this point, yes, you do. I'm going to double check whether there's any time frame that it won't be, but at this point, yeah, you definitely have full access. I will double check what we've had, and if there's anything missing, I'm going to make sure that it goes into the various weeks and stuff like that. So yeah, and anywhere along the way, if you went and it didn't work out and you couldn't find something, just email it and I'll help you guys. Okay, well, I've taken up beyond 9 o'clock here, so I will let you go. It's been fantastic experience for me. I hope it's been a good experience for all of you.
So much fun.
It
Yeah.
has.
Good.
Yeah, I loved it.
Good. So we'll look forward to reconvening in May and keeping in touch otherwise. So great.
Nice
Thank
meeting
you.
everybody. Nice meeting everybody. See you later.
Good
Yeah.
luck getting new
bye.
glasses, Mo. Good luck getting your new glasses, Mo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you guys. Bye-bye.
I'll talk
Yeah.
to you later, Jasmine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye. Yeah,
I'll
definitely
email you and
talk to
call
you
you later,
later.
Jasmine.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Have a good
Bye, Linda.
weekend. Bye.